You've been told that building wealth is hard, that it takes some rare kind of intelligence, some perfect plan, some huge amount of discipline, some lucky break, some secret that other people found before you did. And because you've heard that so many times, you started believing that wealth must be complicated, that it must be far away, that it must belong to people who know something you don't. But listen closely, because this is the part almost nobody says clearly enough. Building wealth is usually much easier than you think. Not because it happens fast, not because it takes no effort, but because it is far less complicated than the world makes it seem. And once you see that, you can never unsee it. That's your first payoff. Because the moment wealth stops feeling mysterious, it starts feeling possible. And the moment it starts feeling possible, you stop watching other people build their future, and you start building your own. The biggest lie you've been sold is that wealth is built through dramatic action, that one giant move changes everything, that one perfect investment, one perfect business idea, one perfect month, one perfect decision suddenly transforms your life. But that's not usually how it works. Wealth rarely arrives like an explosion. It arrives like water filling a glass in the dark. Quietly, slowly, almost invisibly. And then one day, the level is higher than you thought. That's how it happens. And that's why so many people miss it. Because they keep looking for something dramatic, while wealth is being built through things that feel almost too small to matter. You skip one stupid purchase. You save one extra amount. You automate one transfer. You learn one skill. You wait instead of reacting. You repeat one behavior long enough for it to become normal. That's the game. That's the real game. Not intensity, not obsession, not trying to look rich while secretly feeling behind. Just repeatable actions that quietly move money in the right direction. And here's the second payoff. The simpler the system, the more likely you are to actually keep doing it. You do not need a system that impresses people. You need a system that survives your bad days. A system that still works when you're tired, when you're bored, when you're emotional, when you feel unmotivated, when you want to give up. Because wealth is not built on your best day. It's built on all the ordinary ones. And that should relax you. Because now you don't have to become some different person. You don't have to wake up tomorrow with perfect habits, perfect energy, perfect focus, perfect confidence. You just need less chaos, less leaking, less unconscious spending, less pretending, less self-sabotage. That's it. That's one of the most underrated truths about money. You do not need to become extraordinary before you can build wealth. to become a little more intentional. That is so much easier, and it matters so much more. Because when you stop treating money like something that comes and goes on its own, you stop living in reaction. You stop asking where it all went. You stop feeling that little sting after spending, that tiny, private regret, that quiet anxiety at night when everything is finally silent. You know that feeling, when the room is dark and your mind gets honest, and suddenly you start thinking about how much time has passed, how much money has slipped through your hands, how long you've been telling yourself you'll get serious later, how later keeps moving. That feeling right there, that's not weakness. That's awareness trying to wake you up. And that's another payoff. Because once you really see the pattern, you can interrupt it. And once you interrupt it, you stop drifting. Most people are not broke because they're incapable. They're broke because they're unstructured. They're not losing because they're stupid. They're losing because their money has no direction. It lands and then disappears. It gets absorbed by impulse, convenience, emotion, image, and habit. And then they assume the problem is that they need to earn way more. Sometimes earning more helps. Of course it does. But a lot of the time, the first breakthrough is not more income. It's more control. Because money behaves differently when you direct it. That's when something shifts. You stop feeling like money visits your life and start feeling like it stays. That changes you. It changes how you think, how you decide, how you breathe. Because stress gets quieter when your money stops running away from you. And this is where wealth starts becoming emotional, not just financial. Because what you really want is not just a bigger number. You want peace. You want options. You want to stop feeling trapped by every unexpected expense. You want to stop doing math in your head before saying yes to something simple. You want to stop feeling that background pressure in your body, that invisible weight, that constant, low-level noise. And here's the next payoff. Wealth is not only about having more, it's about fear having less control over you. That's why even small progress feels powerful, because the first dollars you keep are not just dollars. They are proof. Proof that you can change the direction. Proof that the story is not fixed. Proof that your future does not have to look like your past. And once you feel that proof, even once, you stop needing motivation every day. Because evidence is stronger than motivation. Evidence says, this is working. Evidence says, keep going. Evidence says, you are not stuck. You are just repeating a pattern. And patterns can be replaced. You've probably been made to feel like wealth belongs to people who know complicated words, people with advanced strategies, people who talk fast, People who make money sound technical and unreachable. But look deeper, look past the noise. Most wealth is built on very boring truths. Spend less than you make. Keep the difference. Protect the difference. Multiply the difference. Wait longer than other people are willing to wait. That's it. Not flashy, not sexy, not dramatic, but devastatingly effective. And that is a massive payoff, because boring is easier to repeat. And anything you can repeat can compound. That word matters. Compound. Because this is where your brain usually underestimates what's possible. You think small actions create small results. That feels logical. But repeated actions do not stay small. They stack. They echo. They build on top of themselves. One saved amount becomes a habit. One habit becomes a standard. One standard changes your identity. And your identity changes your entire financial life. Because once you see yourself as someone who keeps money, you stop negotiating with every temptation. Once you see yourself as someone who invests, you stop needing to be convinced each time. Once you see yourself as someone who builds, you stop living like someone who is only surviving. That shift is quiet, but it is everything. And that's the next payoff. Wealth becomes easier when it stops being something you try to do and starts becoming who you are. Not fake confidence, not performative discipline, just identity. You become the kind of person who does not abandon their future for a temporary feeling. That one sentence alone can change your life. Because so much bad money behavior is emotional. It has nothing to do with logic. It comes from wanting relief, wanting comfort, wanting reward, wanting to feel powerful for one moment, wanting to numb something, wanting to prove something, wanting to keep up, wanting to be seen. And if you don't notice that, money keeps slipping away through emotional exits. But the moment you notice it, you gain power. Because then you can pause. And that pause is worth so much more than it looks. That pause is where wealth begins. Right there. Not in a trading app. Not in a course. Not in a dream. In the pause between impulse and action. In the pause between wanting and buying. In the pause between emotion and decision. That tiny pause can save you years. And that's another payoff. Because wealth is often less about what you do and more about what you stop doing. You stop feeding appearances. You stop buying relief. You stop outsourcing your future to your moods. You stop pretending small leaks don't matter. They do matter. They matter because they repeat. And repeated leaks sink big outcomes. But repeated discipline, even tiny discipline, builds surprising outcomes. That's the beautiful part. You do not need heroic discipline. You need friction in the right places and automation in the right places. Make bad decisions slower. Make good decisions easier. that alone changes everything. Because the easier it is to save, the more you save. The harder it is to waste, the less you waste. Now, wealth is not depending on your mood. It's depending on your system. That is freedom. That is real freedom. Not the fantasy version, the real version. The one where your future keeps improving, even when you are not thinking about it every second. And this is where people get surprised. Because once your system starts working, wealth starts to feel almost anticlimactic. Not in a bad way, in a calming way. Because it stops feeling like magic. It starts feeling mechanical, predictable, reliable, simple. You earn, you keep, you build, you repeat, again and again and again. And one day, the number changes enough to get your attention. Then one day, your stress reacts differently. Then one day, an unexpected bill does not break your week. Then one day, you realize you are not panicking the way you used to. Then one day, you notice you're making choices from patience, not desperation. That is wealth too. Not just the money. The nervous system that no longer feels hunted. The mind that no longer feels cornered. The version of you that no longer needs every month to be a miracle. That's a huge payoff. Maybe the biggest one. Because before luxury comes relief. And relief is life-changing. You sleep differently. You speak differently. You carry yourself differently. You stop radiating urgency. You stop smelling like financial pressure. You stop making rushed decisions because you finally have a little room. And room changes people. Space changes people. Time changes people. That is what money can buy before it buys anything else. Breathing room. And once you have breathing room, you make better decisions. And better decisions create more breathing room. This is how the cycle flips. This is how the spiral turns upward. Not through one giant leap, through repeated stability. That's the part that should comfort you tonight. You do not need to leap. You need to stack. You need to simplify. You need to stop disrespecting the small things that create the big things. Because the small things are the big things. That's the secret. The wealthy version of you is not doing magical things. That version of you is doing ordinary things consistently. That version of you stopped underestimating repetition. That version of you learned that money loves calm. Money likes structure. Money likes patience. Money likes people who know where it's going. And when you become that person, you stop chasing wealth. Because wealth starts slowly organizing itself around your behavior. You may still think, if this is so simple, why do so many people struggle? Because simple is not the same as easy emotionally. Simple does not always feel exciting. Simple does not always satisfy your ego. Simple does not let you fantasize about instant transformation. Simple asks you to respect slow progress. And most people are addicted to urgency. They want the feeling of a breakthrough more than the reality of building one. But you do not need that fantasy anymore. Because here is another payoff. Once you accept that wealth is slow and simple, you become nearly impossible to distract. Now the noise loses power. Now the flashy promises lose power. Now the fake shortcuts lose power. Because you know the truth. The truth is that wealth usually rewards consistency more than brilliance, calm more than chaos, patience more than speed, and direction more than intensity. That should make you feel stronger. Because consistency is learnable. Calm is learnable. Direction is learnable. You do not need to be born with them. You can build them quietly, starting from exactly where you are. Even now, especially now. Tonight is enough. This moment is enough. You do not need some perfect future version of yourself to begin. You begin as the current version of yourself, with slightly better choices. That is more than enough. That is how almost every meaningful change starts. Not with certainty, with decision. A quiet one, a private one, the kind nobody claps for, the kind nobody sees, the kind that looks small on the outside, but changes your whole trajectory on the inside. That is the beginning, and that beginning is easier than you thought. Because maybe wealth was never hiding behind complexity. Maybe it was hiding behind simplicity you kept overlooking. Maybe you kept walking past the answer because it did not look dramatic enough. But now you see it. Now you know. You do not need to impress the world. You need to protect your future. You do not need to act rich. You need to become resilient. You do not need one perfect move. You need 100 quiet ones. And the beautiful thing is, quiet moves still count. In fact, quiet moves are usually the ones that matter most. Because they are real. They are sustainable. They keep working when nobody is watching. And wealth built in private feels very different. It feels solid. It feels honest. It feels like yours. So when you hear people say building wealth is difficult, remember this. What's difficult is confusion. What's difficult is chaos. What's difficult is trying to look successful before you become stable. What's difficult is repeating the same leaks, the same impulses, the same emotional decisions, and hoping life changes anyway. But wealth itself, the actual path, it is often much simpler than you were taught. Earn, keep, build, repeat. Protect your peace. Protect your gap. Protect your future. And keep going long enough for the results to become undeniable. That is how it happens. Quietly, slowly, then suddenly enough to notice. Maybe a night exactly like this, with the room dark and your headphones on, and everything finally still. You'll realize something changed. Not just your money. You. You changed. You became someone who stops leaking. Someone who thinks ahead. Someone who can delay noise. Someone who understands that ease does not come from spending more, but from needing less panic. Someone who finally stopped making wealth harder than it needed to be. And in that moment, you won't feel flashy. You won't feel loud. You'll feel calm, certain, steady. And that feeling, that deep, quiet feeling, is one of the first real signs that wealth is already being built. Not perfectly, not instantly, but truly. And from there, it gets easier, because now your habits know the way. Now your system knows the way. Now your identity knows the way. And when your identity knows the way, you stop getting lost so easily. That is the final payoff. Wealth becomes easier when it stops being a dream you visit and becomes a direction you live. So tonight, you can let go of the idea that wealth is reserved for other people. You can let go of the idea that it must feel dramatic to be real. You can let go of the idea that because it has not happened fast, it cannot happen at all. It can, and it can happen through simple things, repeated things, quiet things, things you can start doing now. That is the part worth remembering. You are not far because it is impossible. You are far because repetition takes time. But time passes anyway. So let it pass in your favor. Let your money stop escaping you. Let your habits start protecting you. Let your future start receiving what your present keeps trying to give away. And then keep going. Quietly, patiently, powerfully. Because building wealth is not nearly as hard as you were told. Most of the time, it is just smaller, slower, and simpler than you expected. And that is exactly why it works.